Welcome into our Top Buffs Countdown, the 2015 edition. This year, we changed it up a little bit, Tyler. We let the fans have a voice in this, and I think that'll add a little bit more fun to this countdown, and we'll kind of debate why we had certain guys where we had them. This first segment, we're going to talk about the guys that just missed the cut. And there were 8 of them that received votes, which was a little bit more than previous years. Once you got past 20 or so, it became a little bit more difficult for me to you almost felt like you were splitting hairs with some of these guys. What was your thought process as you were going through making your top 40 list?
Yeah, definitely. Once we got into the mid-20s, it became a little more difficult to kind of differentiate between guys, especially towards the end of the list in the 30s. I tried to pick guys that either I had a personal connection to on the field, someone I enjoyed watching to get those last few slots, or B, someone that I thought could potentially help us on special teams.
So we'll go down quickly the guys that didn't quite make the top 40 list, and we'll start out at number 48 with Clayton Beauregard. Tyler, you were the one that gave him a vote. Talk a little bit about why he was in your top 40 list.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that I just really enjoy watching play. You know, he's obviously a really undersized guy down inside in the interior, the defensive line. Uses kind of quickness and speed to get around guys. He's not really your typical one technique type of defensive tackle. So he's just really interesting he's entertaining for me to watch, a guy that you root for when he gets on the field. So I just wanted to throw him a little bit of some love, and as we got down to closer to the bottom end of the countdown.
It was good to see him find a role last season. This is somebody that came in as an early enrollee. They tried him at fullback at first. He didn't quite fit in there. They moved him to linebacker. Again, just not a perfect fit for him. And again, to your point, he can't be an every down defensive lineman, but in pass rush situations, he actually helped them at times last season. It's not bad to have a specialist guy. I can kind of see why he's a fringe guy, but maybe not a top 40 guy. At number 47, I had Wyatt Tucker-Smith, long snapper. This is one of those situations, I feel like, Tyler, if they had a horrible long snapper before Wyatt Tucker-Smith got here, people would actually appreciate what he does a little bit more. But they've been really solid at that position. It's like the one position you can point to on the roster that's actually been solid for this Colorado football team for a while now. And so Wyatt Tucker-Smith quietly does his job. I'm not saying he's a world beater by any stretch just because of the position he plays, but he was the guy that snuck in my list. At number 46, the fans actually had defensive tackle Eddie Lopez in their group, kind of playing that nose tackle role, one of the few underclassmen they have at that position. I don't know if he's quite a top 40 guy. He was a guy that saw some action as a true freshman last year. And there's a few fans wondering, hey, maybe we could redshirt him, get that year back. I don't know if they have the depth at that position to do that, though.
Yeah, he's a guy to me that I think the fans really have an interest in because he's from a small town in Texas and he was kind of an unknown coming out of high school. People didn't really know what they were going to get out of him, but they really liked his size. To me, he's a guy who's probably not going to get a lot of time on the field this year. I didn't have him in my top 40, but you never know how the depth chart works out at the defensive line position. There's always somebody every year that seems like they make a bigger impact than you expect, so could be him this year.
I would expect Eddie Lopez will be on both of our top 40 lists at some point in the future, just like you said, maybe not this year when you have Justin Solis and Josh Tupou at that nose tackle position. At number 45, the fans wanted to have Sam Kronsage in their top 40 list. I think, again, this is just a little early here. He's going to be in the mix for that right tackle spot that will be vacated by Stephon Nembot after this coming season. So he's a guy that has a pretty bright future, but I don't think he's quite an impact guy yet.
Right, yeah, he's an offensive lineman. Those guys take a little bit longer to develop traditionally, and there's not really a spot for him to start this year. So to me, he's not a guy that made my top 40 countdown, but kind of as we've been talking about, I would expect him to probably find some starting minutes as he grows into an upperclassman. He's just not a top 40 guy right now because I don't see the impact on the field this year.
And I think it's a good thing for this team to have an offensive lineman that's not going to get some votes in here because they haven't had quite that much depth on the line in a while. So that's probably a positive. At number 44, Jordan Gerke. It was he was on both Tyler and I's top 40 list. Didn't get any love from the fans. I think they're looking back to that Oregon game, which when you talk about Jordan Gerke, you have to go to that because it's the only, I guess, a little bit in the Arizona State game late in there, but it was really kind of your first impression of him as what would it be like if Jordan Gerke was our starter. And then, but like Brian Lindgren said, how much weight do you really put on that, being thrown into that, going into a tough road environment?
Yeah.
I think it was pretty clear, though, that Cepho was the guy. I think that performance kind of solidified that going forward. But I wouldn't necessarily throw out Jordan Gerke as a guy that could contribute here in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a guy that I would prefer to be starting for my team, but at the same time, I think he's a quality backup in the Pac-12. I mean, I think he's somebody, if you have an injury, you can rely on him. He's been in the program for a few years now. You know, he knows the system. He's definitely a very mobile guy. To me, he's a guy that you like to have on your roster because he has experience in games. I mean, Oregon made a lot of quarterbacks look bad last year, so I don't really hold that game much against him. It's really hard to come off the bench cold.
At number 43 was Ryan Moeller, and it's funny because I feel like I'm one of the highest guys on Ryan Moeller and his potential. In our radio show before the spring, I said I would love to see him as maybe the starting nickelback. I didn't have him on my top 40, but he was on your top 40, and he was on the fans' top 40 as well. So talk a little bit about why you had him in there.
Yeah, I mean, I really like him on special teams. He's a guy, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit before we got on the camera here, talking about that play that he made at USC last year, you know, the kickoff where he just crushed the returner. And he makes those kind of plays on special teams all the time. When he was brought in on defense, he really did a pretty good job. I think he's been much better than people expect him to be when he got out on the field, and I really respect that. And I think he's a guy that we can use at multiple positions. So I expect him to get some playing time this year, and I think he's really a pretty solid backup for this secondary.
It's kind of the silver lining in the situation that they had with all those injuries at safety last year is that I think the staff knew obviously that they had a good special teams guy in Ryan Moeller, but it wasn't until that Oregon game when they threw him in the fire. You know, like we talked about, Jordan Gerke kind of sank in that situation. He rose. He was maybe the best defensive player out there that day in his first start ever. So he's a good depth piece there. At number 42, I'm kind of upset that Leo Jackson didn't make the top 40 because he was a guy that came in after not playing last year at Foothill College, had to just take some academic classes to get qualified for here. A lot of times guys in that situation come in out of shape, and it takes them all of spring just to kind of get back into football shape. He showed up and was earning praise from Dave Foreman from day one and was getting quality reps on the D-line from day one. He's got a good frame, good attitude. I think this guy's going to be in the rotation this year. You didn't have him in your list.
Yeah, he was close for me. I think he's a guy that I like the other JUCO defensive linemen a little bit more. I liked what they saw, but he was definitely impressive to me. He was much more ready to play right away than I was expecting him to be. He looks good out there. I mean, I think he'll definitely be in the rotation. He just barely missed out the top 40 for me. He would have been in at least probably the first 3 out.
And then the last guy here that got votes for the top 40 but didn't quite make the cut, Dylan Keeney. I voted for him. And it's kind of like last year, we didn't have Tyler McCulloch in our top 40s because we just didn't really envision that big tight end in the slot having much of an impact. And not to say Tyler McCulloch was an all-conference guy or anything, but he definitely made an impact in that role. And I could see Dylan Keeney doing that. The question is, will he stay healthy? Is he durable to be able to do that? This is somebody that came in, suffered a knee injury early during camp, and then came back and then injured his shoulder, had to have shoulder surgery, didn't practice at all this spring. So it's more, I kind of revert back to how much I liked him coming out of high school. And it's more of a potential thing than anything at this point with Dylan Keeney.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's 100% potential. He's a guy that I think we're all really excited about coming out of high school, but he hasn't been able to stay on the field yet. But I think he's a guy that absolutely has potential to be in the top 40 countdown, someone at the end of the season, a guy that I wish I had in there for sure. But until he stays on the field and shows us that he can make an impact, he's a guy that I left off for now.
All right. Well, those are the guys that just missed the cut. Next time you see us, we'll be breaking down the guys that did make the cut.